Hello, F2 Fan 5000 here with Indycar driver ratings. Alabama Grand Prix. So start off, good race. It's not that easy to overtake. Sometimes the cars are following each other around, but we got some really good overtakes, especially with the push to pass. Going to start off with Joseph Newgarden. The Penske team leader had a fairly average weekend. I'll give him a 6.5. He's fairly anonymous, but I suppose he finished in the top 10. His teammate Scott McLaughlin crashing in practice / qualifying. Disappointing weekend. Didn't really come through the field. And it hasn't been a good year so far for Scott McLaughlin. He would have been hoping for more. Kaya Collette, disappointing race for the rookies and the newcomers. And Collette was the only thing I can say about him. I'll give him a 5 out of 10 because he was ahead of Stingray Rob. But that's about as much as I can say about it. Patricia Ward gets a 4 out of 10. I don't know what that was. I've got a big question mark. To me, that's like he's had a look at his teammate Nolan Siegel and gone, I want what he's having. It just, he finished, I think, one place in front of Nolan Siegel and had no pace the whole race at all, and qualified outside of the top 10. And this is when you compare that and contrast that to Christian Lundgaard fighting for the win. It's a very confusing weekend to me for Patricio Ward, who I thought was the McLaren team leader in Indycar. Nolan Siegel gets a 4 out of 10. You know, no one gets a really small rating. I didn't see any major driver errors from anybody. I don't think I saw Siegel the whole race on the screen. He was down in 17th place or something the whole race. And that's, there's nothing else I can say. But no crashes, no running through the gravel, spins. There was one spin, but it wasn't Siegel. So 4 out of 10. Christian Lundgaard gets a 10 out of 10. He could have fought for the race win if it weren't for the slow pit stop. He had roaring pace on the fresh, soft tyres in stint 3. Was closing down Alex Palou. And then that the wheel gun issue cost him, and he couldn't get the win. He couldn't fight for it. He ended back up in 3rd place, but he eventually came through to 2nd, overtaking Graham Rahal. Kevin Simpson, he gets a 4 out of 10. Thanks for participating. You know, a long way behind Scott Dixon and Alex Palou, but, you know, didn't crash the car. That's all I can say about Kevin Simpson this weekend. Scott Dixon gets a 7 out of 10. He's had a decent comeback through the field to get a fine 7th place. He's definitely a master of strategy and knows how to push when everyone else is in the pit lane having their stops. Alex Palou gets the win. He gets a 9.5 out of 10. Sorry to be very specific. I feel as though if it hadn't been for that pit stop drama, Christian Lundgaard could have won the race, which means I have high expectations for Alex Palou. But other than that, he was fantastic. He drove a beautiful race. You know, again, put it on pole, dominated. But, you know, as I said in the 3rd stint, Lundgaard came back at him. I'm not sure if the used hard tyre, the black tyre, was the right move. But anyway, that's what he went with. But in the end, it's a very accomplished win for Alex Palou. Very clinical. David Malukas gets a 9. I'm very impressed that he's his first year in Penske, and he's beating the established drivers at a road course. I had an opinion of Malukas that he's better at ovals, but to see him drive so well at a road course, I'm very impressed. He did challenge for the final step on the podium and just missed out. Good tactics to save his push to pass until the end. Santino Ferrucci gets a 7 out of 10. A hard-fought race. He didn't seem to have the pace of the drivers around him, but 8th place is a good result for him. Graham Rahal gets a 10 out of 10, a fantastic weekend for him. He lapped his two teammates, Mick Schumacher and Louis Foster, and put it on the podium. Had to fight Christian Longard, Alex Palou, David Malukas, and still comes out with a podium. So, a fantastic weekend for Graham Rahal. And then coming to Romain Grosjean, he gets a 6 out of 10. He looked quick all race, but he seemed to always lose positions in the pit stop phases and finished a long way down. I believe he finished outside of the top 15 or 15th or something. But in the first half of the race, I was a little bit funny because he's running just in front of Marcus Ericsson. It reminded me of that safety car incident back in Baku in 2018. And I was remembering that, and he said, "Oh, it's Ericsson's fault." But he looked quick, but the result didn't come. Something happened in the pit stop phases. Maybe that's on him, or maybe the in-lap, out-lap, or maybe that's to do with the team. Slow pit stops, poor strategy, I'm not sure, because we don't see him in the second half of the race much. But he always was on the back of another car trying to overtake. And Dennis Hauger, the teammate, gets a 3 out of 10. He's a reigning Indy Next champion, and that was a poor race, stuck behind Stingray Rob. Alex Rossi finished 11th. I'll give him a 6 out of 10. I don't think 11th place really should be points, but, in IndyCar it is. But he's a long way ahead of his teammate, Christian Rasmussen. So what can I say? And it looked as though his car lacked pace compared to those around him. Could be a setup issue with the Ed Carpenter racing cars. And Christian Rasmussen, a second race in a row that he's invisible, gets a 4 out of 10. Hardly saw him all race. And Will Power also gets a 4 out of 10. It's a little bit harsh, I suppose, but, he came like he's had another crash coming in the weekend, and then it's not the first one, and it's affected his race. Cole Kirkwood gets an 8 out of 10. He's the best Andretti driver. 5th place, very consistent. Good points for him and his title charge. Coming to Marcus Ericsson, he gets a 6.5. He's consistent now, getting inside the top 10, but it was fairly unremarkable. He's a long way behind Kirkwood, come to think of it. So, but he didn't have a lot of pace. He had to battle other drivers, but he was overtaken by Grosjean, and then he's finished well ahead of Grosjean. So he's made the most of it. Louis Foster gets a 3 out of 10. The last driver on the road. No pace, absolutely destroyed by Graham Rahal. Mick Schumacher also gets a 3. Again, no pace and destroyed by Graham Rahal. Nothing, I think an overtake attempt. Maybe overtook Foster on the road, but they finished fairly line astern, or at least the last time I saw them, they were line astern. So nothing. And Felix Rosenqvist gets a 4.5. Poor qualifying. Made up a few positions in the race. Probably 4.5 is a little bit generous considering Will Power got a 4, but I don't think Rosenqvist crashed, though I didn't hear of it. And Marcus Armstrong gets an 8 out of 10. A fantastic weekend, a very quiet weekend. You didn't see him much on the screen. I think that he's a long way behind Kirkwood and a long way ahead of Dixon, but he's just held that 6th place, which is always a good thing. Rinus VK gets a 5 out of 10 because he had a spin and he's recovered to the top 15, so for you to have a spin like that and then get back up to where you were, I suppose you get a 5 out of 10. And Stingray Rob, he gets a 4 out of 10 for doing what he does best. So, interesting season so far. Alex Palou is not as consistent, is not as dominant. Alex Palou is not as dominant as he was last year. He looks a little bit more, what can I say, a little bit more vulnerable this year than he did last year. He's still a very strong force in the Indycar, and I think that he's probably the favourite for the title. But some of the other drivers are able to, we're seeing his armour getting penetrated more often this year. I'm not so sure about how good Chip Ganassi is this year. They're not as convincing anymore. I don't see that Scott Dixon is as competitive this year as he was last year. But they're still a force in IndyCar, and I think Palou's the favourite. I think there's more opportunities for other drivers to take the wins and stuff. The races have been pretty good so far. Love the strategy. Love the there's some good circuits. Alabama's a good circuit. Lovely undulations. Hills and long radius turns, all this sort of stuff. Classic old school circuit. So, America does have great circuits, and this is a really good one, enjoyable to watch. Yeah, and an interesting title fight too, but I think, let's see how we go. I think that Kyle Kirkwood, I think what the commentators said at the end there is quite accurate. They said that, you've got to have that maximise the bad weekends, and I think he did that with his 5th place. And he's level on points with Palou, so we'll see how it goes. Though usually Alex Palou, a bad weekend is still on the podium, so so we'll see. He's going to have to have his Kyle Kirkwood has to have his work cut out for him. And Christian Lundgaard, also fantastic race. Graham Rahal, not consistently enough up there. But, good thing, good times. Hopefully we see the rookies coming back into the mix as well. And hopefully then there's a bit of a gap. I think there's Long Beach and then there's a gap. So, but look forward to it.